Hi, good morning. Wanted to get started here. So just getting everything set up. We have a large audience today, which is wonderful. Hi, good morning. My name's Caitlin. I'm with Canopy. I am the current head of the training department, but I'm also a therapist. So my background is in a clinical background. I have worked with clients directly, but now I do the training side. And we have people joining as we're going. A couple quick things before getting into the content. There is a PDF version of this slide deck under the handouts. So if you are interested in downloading that, feel free to do so. And then also, if you do have a question or comment, I can see those coming through. No one else in the audience can, but they are coming through on my screen. So just type that into the questions box. We have a really big audience today. There's a chance I may not be able to get to everyone's questions, but I will do what I can. And so if you see me glancing over, I'm just keeping an eye on the questions to see if there's anything coming through. And so if I do address a question or comment that comes through, I'm not going to say who asked that. I'm just going to say, you know, someone shared or asked, and then summarize that. So we just tend to default to anonymity in that regard. This presentation will also probably the next couple of days be up on our YouTube channel. So if anyone missed it or knows someone who wants to view it, that will be available. And so wanted to kind of get into the content here, but wanted to do a quick overview just as a reminder. So this is, you know, really kind of high level overview of educating ourselves. And really a lot of this is around how to connect to resources. So a couple things. Number one, this can be a very triggering topic, and I recognize that. This presentation is certainly not meant to, and is definitely not meant to teach anyone how to be a therapist, how to assess someone's mental health. This is about, you know, some basic signs and symptoms, some things to, you know, do and not do. But the end of the presentation really is about community resources. So, and of course, the resources we provide as well, because this is not something that anyone is meant to handle alone. So this is really just a lot around awareness and resources, not around how to teach anyone how to be a therapist. So just wanted to clarify that. We have almost 100 people in the training right now, so welcome. I'm really glad to see we have so many people wanting to learn about this. You know, I think this topic tends to be one that is sometimes uncomfortable for people to talk about, very understandable. But if we don't talk about it, there's more stigma, there's less resources available. So I think it is really an important topic to discuss and educate ourselves on. So wanted to go through, you know, we have this scheduled for an hour. We'll see in terms of just the amount of questions that come through. It's certainly not going to go longer than that. And we will go from there. So I wanted to start with a quick, very common myth, and that there is actually a lot of misconception around this. So when I am talking to folks around suicide awareness, response, you know, what to say and not say, one of the most common questions that I get or comments that I get is, you know, I'm worried about asking someone if they're having thoughts of hurting themselves, having thoughts of killing themselves. You know, I'm worried that if they didn't have those thoughts, now I've put that idea in their head. And that's not true. It's a very understandable concern, but wanted to make sure to clarify if anyone has some, you know, trepidation around even bringing up the conversation because of this. That is not true. So asking someone about suicide or if their thoughts about that is not going to lead them to think about something they haven't thought of before. So it is always best to check on someone if you have concerns. So I try to, you know, reduce any barriers in terms of making that connection or offering that support. And this is one of the biggest ones that I sometimes hear. So there are more direct and indirect warning signs. Again, some of these are, and I'll go through some of the indirect warning signs here in a moment. Some of them we're not going to be able to see or hear. And again, this isn't about, overly watching every single person's behavior all the time. A lot of this, again, with direct warning signs, they're more direct, so probably more obvious. But a lot of this is a change in behavior, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in a moment. But it's direct warning signs if someone is making comments about wanting to hurt themselves, direct comments, behaviors. Sometimes we will see this if we're talking to the individual in person or on the phone. We may also see this on social media posts. So something that we're seeing as, sorry, there's a comment here that folks can't see or hear me. If you can see and hear me, just type into the questions that you can. I always like to try to make sure to default to checking to see which end the issue is. Okay, all right, thank you. Right. If you haven't typed in yet, that's okay. Thank you so much. So I got a lot of responses that folks can see and hear me. So all right, well, hopefully the folks on that end can figure out their audio. I'm going to proceed on. I appreciate everyone letting me know that. So this is where, again, if we are noticing these behavioral changes, thinking about, oh, I'm not sure if I should say something, or, what if I'm wrong? I get that concern sometimes. And this is why in a few slides from now, I'm going to share some, how to bring up that conversation. But it is, I think, really important to be comfortable with having a potentially uncomfortable conversation. Again, that doesn't mean now you are required or expected or should be their therapist, but really being that safe place to talk to someone in a non-judgmental, non-stigmatizing way, so you can help them get connected to professionals who can assist them. So we talked about some of these already, but some of those more direct verbal cues. This third one, I think, can fall into direct or indirect. I think sometimes we'll hear it just, nothing matters anymore. No one would care if I wasn't here anymore. And I'll talk about some potential responses to that as you are supporting that person and getting them connected to resources. But again, with the direct comments and cues, of course, those are going to be more obvious. Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, let's see here. Just gonna keep an eye on if there's any other questions. All right. Okay, let me see. All right. Don't miss anything coming through. So the potential indirect warning signs, of course, and I'd mentioned this earlier, a lot of these we're not able to see as an outsider. And again, and I'll probably say this many times, a lot of this is around a behavioral change. So notable changes in behaviors. Are they giving things away? Are they asking if you would be willing to take care of like a pet? If they're giving away, special items to themselves, prized possessions, major mood changes, maybe more impulsivity. The other thing I always like to be very thoughtful about is that there can be items on this list that are in no way associated with suicidal thoughts or desire to hurt oneself. These are just potential indirect signs. And so if you're seeing a change in behavior in a loved one, a colleague, and you're noticing that change, or maybe there's kind of a, it's surprising you, something they're saying or something they're giving away, or a change in behavior or mood, to feel, comfortable checking in with someone. And one thing that I think can be really helpful when we're considering ways, and I'll provide more examples, but just as I'm thinking about it now on this slide, is it's really helpful to remember that we're not there again to diagnose someone. So I tend to try to avoid comments like, you seem depressed. because what that does is that is inadvertently kind of putting us in a position of diagnosing them. And also when we start sentences with you, that kind of you versus I statement that we hear, a you statement can sometimes put someone inadvertently on the defensive or lead them to kind of shut down. They're feeling potentially being kind of accused or they're being watched. And it's also not our role to diagnose someone. And the other piece to that is that if we say something like, you seem different lately, or you seem off, or you seem depressed, those are actually very vague terms. So what does that mean? So I would try to, if you are looking to approach someone, if you're wanting to potentially give examples or something you've noticed, give an example. So, hey, I was surprised that you, gave that item away. I know it's so important to you. Can you tell me more about that decision? That is where you're inviting them into a conversation without talking at them about them, if that makes sense. So coming at that with curiosity, non-judgment, if you are going to speak to some of these warning signs that you're seeing. So that I think can be a really helpful shift, is like, how can I ask more questions? Lean in with curiosity instead of kind of talking at a person. Yeah, absolutely. So someone was asking about tone mattering. Yeah, absolutely. So starting with that curiosity, having a reflection statement, and tone, nonverbals, tone of voice is so powerful in all levels of communication. And that can imply if there's a judgment behind it. I think it can also be really helpful to make sure we don't come across inadvertently as patronizing. It's like, oh, like where we're kind of accidentally, the tone can sound like we're almost like talking down to someone. And that's another reason I think asking questions is so powerful. But I'm also going to talk here in a moment about the sort of helpful and less helpful types of questions to ask. That this comment, I think, in the chat about tone and how we ask that will come up again. So I appreciate that comment as well. So I mentioned some of these, but it just doesn't feel like there's any point anymore. Nothing's ever going to get better. That's a really common one. And this is, again, where I think we can feel very uncertain as to how to respond to that, because what we want to do is say, it will get better, don't worry, you shouldn't feel that way, right? All those things, which are incredibly well-meaning. But number one, we don't know that. Like, we don't know someone's story. We don't know those experiences. We can't promise anything in terms of what the future holds for any of us, not to get too kind of existential. And so this is where it helps to kind of shift away from, it'll all be fine, you're okay, to, again, asking more questions, kind of having a different approach to that. Yeah, no, the way that GoToWebinar this is set up is that I can see the questions coming through. Audience members cannot. I will get to as many as I can in terms of sharing what's coming up, but I just had a question on how that works. So, there's nothing I can do. So when I think a lot of times it can help us to bring it to the present, and I'll talk about some ways to do that. But what we try to do oftentimes is just fix it. Like, how can I fix this? How can I make sure they immediately don't feel like this anymore? And number one, we can't always fix everything. It's not our job to solve everything. It's not even possible a lot of times. It could be a lot of different complex dynamics going on. Yep, I'm going to share all sorts of examples of how to respond to some of these in a moment here. We'll have some slides on that. And so it's kind of taking away that mentality of, I have to have the exact right answer to solve the problem for them, because we oftentimes don't. And then we get very stressed and we kind of go into, well, you shouldn't feel that way. It's all going to be okay. But those can sometimes come across as these kind of placating terms. It's like, how do we know if it's going to be okay, or you shouldn't feel that way? If anyone has ever told you you should or shouldn't feel that way, typically it's not very helpful, because you already do. And so just being told don't feel like that is not particularly going to be very beneficial, and can sometimes lead someone to kind of shut down and not feel as comfortable sharing how they're feeling. And so this is where a lot of it is our ability to slow down and be willing to sit with someone's immediate feelings that they're having, without trying to instantly fix or instantly make them not feel that way anymore. So again, as a quick reminder before we get into some ways to intervene, sometimes someone will say, well, I may see some of these behaviors, but there's no way that individual would ever be having thoughts of hurting themselves. Anyone at any time could be having those thoughts. And so if you ever see any behaviors or notice any signs and symptoms or anything that you see as a concern, always remember to check in with them, or if you're not able to or don't have that ability to find a way to check in with someone who may be able to assist. So this is more of the direct question. So if you have concerns about someone hurting themselves, having those thoughts, asking them directly. Sometimes there's a lot of concern about, I don't know if I should just ask it that directly. And this is where it could be giving an example. Hey, I noticed this. I just wanted to check in with you based on, you had said this the other day, and I really am wanting to, check in and see how you're doing. Are you having any thoughts of hurting yourself or killing yourself? I just wanted to make sure that you are getting any of the support that you need. So it's very important to just ask that directly. Also, if someone is coming to you and sharing that information or saying, I really have been feeling that way lately, it does mean that they really trust you. Again, it doesn't mean then that you should be handling it alone. And I will go into in a moment if they're like, don't tell anyone else. But really, honoring that person in terms of their confidentiality. So only, sharing this information with others if you have immediate concerns about their safety. And having that conversation with them. It's always best to have them be part of that whenever possible. Knowing when to bring this conversation up with people. So if you're going to approach someone with a concern, find a way and a time that is going to be as, as kind of comfortable of a space, as private as a space that's available to you. And that's not always going to be possible. There's not always just this like immediate perfect space to go to, but as best as possible, finding a time that would be as conducive to a conversation like that as possible. And if they say yes, you can ask, have you had any thoughts of how you would do this? Have you ever thought about this before? Was there anything that anyone that you felt like was helpful to talk to in the past? If they say yes, like, is there someone I can connect you with who you had, talked to in the past to work through this? And so asking some of those follow-up questions, really, again, it's not because you're asking them because you're their therapist or that you're going to handle it alone. I can just give you some more information as to the best next steps of connecting them to resources. One thing that I will share now, and this is on the resource page here in a couple slides, is that sometimes individuals will say that they are, maybe you may say, for example, would you be comfortable talking to a counselor right now? That might be, helpful just to kind of be able to process some of this with a professional. I'd be happy to get you connected to someone. And in some cases, I'll hear from folks that they're not quite comfortable calling or talking to someone on the phone, but maybe they'd be comfortable texting. And so that is a good reminder of, yeah, if talking to someone on the phone or making that call seems overwhelming, we can sit here and I can, help type into your phone the text number. I'll provide all this on the resources slide. That could be a starting point of just texting with someone. And I can sit here with you while you're doing that. While you're doing that, I can reach out to this individual who can come pick you up, like depending on where you're at. So medium of communication is good to remind folks that there are multiple different ways to communicate with a professional. Again, because sometimes people have a little bit of anxiety about like making a cold call, not sure who they're going to talk to. So that texting can be a good starting point. So reminding someone that you are a safe person to talk to, again, that is where it is saying, I'm here for you and I want to make sure that I can help you and get you connected to resources, calmly asking about information, getting more information from them. It's really helpful to ask open-ended questions. So instead of saying, are you feeling okay? Again, there's nothing wrong with that question, but that's kind of a yes or no answer. And so sometimes a person will be like, oh yeah, I'm fine. Instead of, hey, I've noticed this recently, or I noticed you had said this earlier. How have you been feeling lately? Has anything been, what have there been any changes or anything that you want to, discuss further? So something that we can ask that's going to be a little more open-ended than just, are you doing okay or not? Always make sure that you have access to resources. You're not expected to handle this alone. Really normalizing that. And this is completely up to each individual because everyone's boundaries are different. If it's something that truly has been your experience and you're willing to share, say, I've talked to a counselor before and it's been really helpful. Again, only if that's true and only if you're comfortable sharing that. So I wanted to be very mindful of that. Everyone's boundaries and comfort level is different in terms of their own personal stories. The balance with that, though, is that we don't want to turn it on ourselves. So it's helpful to normalize that of, I know sometimes talking to a counselor can be overwhelming. It's helped for me in the past. That's good. Not, well, one time this happened to me, and then you go into this whole long thing about your own experience. Now you're kind of taking that, the attention and all that and putting that onto you. So there is that balance of that empathy versus suddenly making it about you. Also just moving more slowly. And this goes kind of touching on that earlier comment about tone, body language. When we are very anxious or we aren't sure what to do, we talk fast, it's hard for us to think logically, we're kind of moving quickly, and we don't realize how much anxiety we're kind of projecting because we're feeling anxious, and that's understandable. So just remembering, even if, and I think I have a slide later on some self-care strategies, but how to just make sure that we are staying calm enough so we can best support that person. So, making sure that we, again, that kind of famous quote of listen versus waiting to talk. And that's where asking more questions can be really helpful. Sometimes a person may say, I do want to tell you something, but you have to promise not to tell anyone. But if they're saying, I have immediate plan to hurt myself, we do have to, I think, to talk to someone. And so having that conversation of, I am here to support you, and my number one priority is keeping you safe. And so I'm hearing you say that you're having these immediate thoughts. And so I want to, us together, have a plan right now of who to bring in to support you best. Would you feel comfortable texting someone? So giving some options around that. It's also not an appropriate time to have a moral debate with someone around why someone should or shouldn't do that. So really kind of stepping out of any kind of existential or moral debate. Also, and I kind of mentioned this earlier, but being careful about how we ask questions. So sometimes like, you're not thinking about hurting yourself, are you? That is very much implying we need them to say no, even if that's not true. So being careful about how we ask those questions. Let me see here. So just seeing if there's any comments coming through. Let's see. Yeah, they were asking about like responses to their answers to the questions. I do have some follow-up to that. So there is a slide with more examples of that. Yeah, so examples of this individual, like, I want to focus on supporting you during this time. Yes, that's a really good suggestion. So being careful not to say like, oh, you don't really mean that. So kind of back to the slide here, or we talked about you should or shouldn't feel. You're just not thinking clearly right now. You'll feel better tomorrow. A lot of that can be minimizing. And sometimes that, again, it comes from a place typically of us wanting to be helpful. But sometimes those comments are coming through more so from our own fear of like needing them to not be feeling that way. And that will sometimes, again, lead that individual to feel less comfortable being honest with us, and feeling like we're only really going to accept a no as an answer. So being thoughtful about kind of how and what we say. So this is, again, practicing empathy, normalizing validating their feelings. So what I mean by that is someone may say, I've just been feeling so guilty lately about some of the, maybe like a life decision I made recently. And what we will want to say is, you shouldn't feel guilty, right? And we may truly believe that, like in our minds, like there's no reason to feel guilty about that. So we're trying to encourage them to not feel that, but they already do. So what I mean by validating someone's feelings is, instead of saying you shouldn't feel guilty, what I would say is, I hate that feeling of feeling guilty. And that sounds so difficult to be sitting in that emotion right now. I know in the past when I felt guilty, it's just such an overwhelming emotion. I hear you. That sounds so, so challenging. I am sitting with you and here as a support to you. And no matter what you're feeling, I want to be here as a support. So we're not saying, yeah, you should feel guilty about that, but we're also not minimizing it as, well, you just shouldn't feel that way. So a lot of times that empathy is like, all of us have felt the feeling of guilt. All of us have felt the feeling of, grief. And it doesn't mean we had the exact same experience, but we can sit there and validate that that's a really difficult feeling to feel, and we are there to support them and get them connected to resources. So that's really what I mean by that, validate their feelings. And let them know that you are there, that you are going to stay there and be available for them, to sit with them, make sure they're not feeling rushed, and say, I am going to sit here until we get you connected to those resources. If you're unable to do that, saying, here's what I want to do right now to make sure that you're not alone. And then whether they have told you that they're willing to call someone that they know, or a crisis line, you can drop them off somewhere with like a loved one, or any kind of like a warm handoff. So some other suggestions, I want to make sure my slides are still shown. Yep, every once in a while I'm like, okay, I just want to make sure people are seeing what I'm seeing. So some helpful language to use, because like I mentioned earlier, we don't always have the answer. We can't fix things. We can't tell someone just don't feel that way. It's really hard to sit with that. So saying something like, you're not alone. It's okay to ask others for help. Because sometimes someone may say, well, now I feel like I'm being a burden to you too. I feel bad that I'm like putting this on you or telling you about this. And I don't like asking for help. I can handle it by myself. And so that's a way to, again, validate them. And like, it's really hard, I think, sometimes to ask for help. It takes a lot of courage to do that. You're not alone. It's okay to ask others for help. That's why I'm here. Let's talk about what we can do to get you the support that you need. So really kind of, again, we can normalize that anxiety and fear, and then, encourage them and really show that it's a safe space. Also, and this goes back to that earlier comment I was talking about earlier, it's like, it's okay to be feeling that. Some emotions just feel so overwhelming, like they're never going to go away. And that's such a difficult place to be in. I hear you, and I hear that that's what you're experiencing, and I am here to support you. And sometimes people say, I feel like I'm going crazy. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Like, you're not going crazy. I'm here. I understand what you're saying. I'm here to support you. This last one on here, I think what can be helpful about that is that right now portion of it. So a lot of times when we are feeling kind of a flooded an emotional state, and if someone is also having suicidal thoughts, it feels very much like this is always how it's going to feel. And our physical body is having that experience of like, it is literally never going to feel different than this. And so instead of saying it'll get better, you won't feel like this forever, like all of those, which can sometimes come across as more like, oh, it's fine, just wait it out. And it doesn't have to be pointless here. It can be whatever feeling they're naming. So that's just an example, but maybe they're saying, I'm just feeling so hopeless. That's a common experience someone's having, or emotion they're having. I know it sounds hopeless right now. And I believe this is something that you can get through. I'm here to help you get through that. So with the right now, it's like, we're not telling them you shouldn't feel that, don't feel that way. It's like, I hear that that's that experience that you are feeling right now. And the right now statement kind of brings it to the present of like, this is a present current experience. So I find that to be much more helpful in that language versus this will be better in a few days, or some type of kind of placating language. So the right now piece, I think, is a really great way to integrate that into, and someone had talked about kind of like that hope language. So bringing hope in without just being like, it'll all be fine, you know. And so I find these to be helpful ways of approaching this. The other thing is that these are some examples, and also we want to be as authentic as possible. It's not about, okay, I have to memorize this exact quote, because we don't want to come across as robotic. So that's where it may be that it's a different feeling than pointless, or I hear what you're saying, you're not alone. Like, but these are kind of the starting point of an approach to how to respond more empathetically. So we are really there present with them. And for some folks who may have joined a little bit later, I know I've mentioned this a couple times, but this entire slide deck is available to download. So if you go under the handouts, the little arrow, click the little arrow next to handouts on GoToWebinar, you can download this entire slide deck, because I think a lot of this is really great to just have as ongoing resources. So I'd mentioned this earlier, but we truly cannot be very helpful to others if we are escalated. So when we are when we're feeling really anxious or kind of in that fight, flight, freeze mode, what happens physiologically is that our logic brain goes offline. So it's hard for us to see multiple perspectives. It's a time where someone's like, wait, I thought I had put the resources for this somewhere and I can't remember where I put that. That's because we're really kind of in an escalated, triggered state, and we're not thinking logically. So what I try to do is, how can I calm myself down? So taking a couple deep breaths, and again, with deep breathing, it's a lot about the out breath. And that can be something, even if it's like, hey, we're sitting here right now, as we are talking together, and as I'm sitting here with you, would you be comfortable or interested in doing a couple deep breaths so we can sit here together? And you're giving them a choice. You're not telling them they have to do that. I think a lot of times when we're supporting someone else and they are in a crisis state, a lot of that is there's an aspect of feeling like a sense of a loss of control. And when we can give someone a choice, it can really create and offer that sense of control, and in a real sense. And the choice can be literally as simple as, would you prefer to keep chatting about this here, or would you prefer to chat about it in this other space or this other area? And it seems like maybe a simple, small decision, but ultimately in the end, it's giving that person a choice. And so that can be a helpful way to allow someone some space for that self-agency. And it can also bring someone back into the present, and it also helps us too. So when we're supporting someone else, give them a choice whenever possible. Move slower, that's for us and them. Be mindful of how to kind of calm our system down. If I find that I'm feeling anxious and it's hard to actively listen without getting distracted or interrupting, is thinking, okay, before I say anything, I'm going to count back from 3. Or what you can do is, yes, exactly. Someone had talked about how like that co-regulation, of course, that's a really great way of wording it. One other thing you can do for yourself, or you can even say, if you want to try this with me, I'm going to do this right now, of like, I'm just going to drop my shoulders and relax my face and jaw. Like, just be in the moment right now. I'm here with you. And if that would be helpful for you too, great. If not, that's okay too. So we can do very quick, small, immediate things to regulate ourselves and be able to be more present with them and invite them to practice that with us. And then both individuals are sometimes just have a slight more ability to potentially see more options, kind of, especially for us as that helper of bringing that logic brain back online. Like, I am doing this to better assist them. So someone was asking, like, should we avoid naming our own emotions? Like explanation for why we're trying to take a pause or breathe. I'm just summarizing that question. It's a really good question. So what I think is important is that we don't want to project onto the other person, like what you're saying is making me feel anxious. And I'm not implying that that person was suggesting that. But you are worrying me, you are stressing me out. We definitely do not want to share or say that. What I would say is if you want to kind of invite someone in to do some regulation, or you're sharing or you're doing it, I would frame it more of, I want to make sure I am here and present with you and able to assist you as best as possible. One thing that helps me do that is to take a couple deep breaths. So you're focusing on them and wanting to support them, but you can still name what you're doing and be like, if you want to do it with me, I invite you to, but that's up to you. So we can name what we're doing and that we are doing it as a way to help ourselves be as present kind of emotionally and mentally as possible with them, without saying, I'm going to do some deep breaths because what you're telling me is really causing me anxiety. Like, we don't want to do that. So hopefully that answered that or differentiated that for that question that came through. But that's a really good question of finding that balance of self-disclosure without making it about us and kind of like turning the whole thing on being about us, or inadvertently kind of putting the other person in the position of caretaking us then. If we're saying what you're saying is causing me so much stress, and then they're going to apologize or not feel as comfortable with being honest. And so finding a balance of being authentic and being present with them, but keeping the focus on them. And keeping that focus on them, again, doesn't mean we are a robot with no feelings, but that's why it can help to say, hey, it's going to help me right now to be super present. And so one thing that helps me do that is this activity. Yeah, someone asking about what if we're concerned about someone, they don't want help, or to talk, showing concerning signs. Absolutely, that's a really tough one. So that's where, if we're approaching someone, be like, hey, I'm really concerned, and I wanted to, talk to you, see how you're doing. I noticed X, Y, Z, and they say, I'm fine, I don't want to talk about it. Then respecting that boundary, we can't force someone to share with us or talk, and say, I respect that. I wanted to check in. I hope that you know that if there's anything you ever want to talk about or have concerns about, please don't hesitate to talk to me. If there are other resources that I could help provide for you, I'm also happy to do that if you'd prefer to talk to someone else. And so we can provide, that we are there if they do want to talk, but we can't force someone to. So that would be kind of my first approach if I talk to someone and they don't want to have that conversation. So some of this is, how and when we are making that referrals. We've talked a little bit about it, but if they say, yeah, I have really been struggling, some of these thoughts have come up for me, we ask some follow-up questions like we went over on the earlier slides. And if they say, yes, I'd love to talk to someone, then having those resources available. I'll have an entire list of resources on a later slide of, would you prefer to talk to someone on the phone or text with someone? Or maybe they would say, is there any way you can call my best friend, partner, family member, and they can come pick me up? Or if potentially you have the means, the time, the access to drive them somewhere and take them somewhere, that's great. That's not always possible. So it's not that's not required, but if you can. If say it's a colleague and you're at work and maybe they're talking to you about it, would that be something you'd be willing to talk to, so-and-so supervisor about? I know they have tons of resources and that's what we're here for, to support you. If they say yes, like, okay, let's go, we can go together and talk to them. If they say no, I would say, are you still comfortable talking to me? I really want to make sure you're getting resources and connected to someone. I'm going to, and you could either text or email them. If you're concerned about someone's immediate safety, then that's where I think it's important to make sure to tell someone, I'm concerned about your immediate safety and I really want to make sure that you are safe. I do want to, let you know that I want to follow up and make sure that you are getting the resources that you need. if it's at the workplace and a colleague is telling you something and you are worried about their immediate safety, obviously make sure you know your own company's policy and procedure, but I would encourage you to find a supervisor, find someone to talk to about that. And that would, someone's asking, like, if they don't want to talk to anyone, I'll work it out myself. If someone has not disclosed, an immediate plan or desire to hurt themselves, I think that is where kind of that comment of, I want to respect your boundaries, and I also, really want to make sure that you feel comfortable. Hopefully, you feel comfortable coming to me. If not, I'm not someone that you'd feel comfortable talking to, I can certainly provide you some resources of folks. I think this is where it can also be important to check in. So maybe someone said that, and then whether it's a loved one, whether it's a colleague, like check in with them and say, hey, I know we chatted yesterday, wanted to see if there's something you wanted to talk about, or if there's additional resources I can support you with. So having that follow-up. Yeah, if you have an immediate fear for someone's safety, if it's a loved one, you can, I encourage people, of course, if you are concerned about someone's immediate safety, to call 911. And so, ultimately, we want to make sure that people are safe. If you are at the workplace and it's a colleague, again, find a supervisor, find someone who you can talk to. And so, as much as we can, trying to have, if they're willing to utilize us as a resource and get connected, that's great. If they are not wanting to talk and they have not disclosed immediate reports of a plan or intent, then, reminding them that they can talk to us anytime, following up with them, checking in. If you have immediate concerns about safety outside of the workplace, call 911. If you're at the workplace, report it to a supervisor. So some resources I wanted to provide, I'll also give, of course, our information, but we have a very large audience, and there may be folks who are wanting to provide these resources to others who may not have Canopy as an employee assistance program. So I really wanted to make sure that everyone here has resources beyond just us as well. So a couple of links and numbers here. So SAMHSA is a Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Association. There are tons of resources on there, just as continuing to educate ourselves on what to do, how to approach it, but also there are hotlines on there, chat available for both mental health and substance use, for loved ones, for individuals. It's just a wealth of resources and knowledge, and just about every case I recommend that link as a resource for folks. There's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They have hotlines, they have resources, they have a really, really thorough kind of FAQ questions of like how to handle situations, what to do. And then some folks may be familiar with 988. You can text that, you can call that. That is a 24/7 national crisis suicide line that is free, available to anyone all the time. And that's an easy number to remember. You can also get more resources about that organization through this link. This one is a good resource link for if you have concerns about someone else, like how to approach that, just more resources beyond even what we talked about today. So these are really helpful just to continue to educate ourselves, know what's available. Even if sometimes people have like a card in their wallet with like numbers, just so they have it available. Yeah, and someone is asking about like law enforcement, veterans, and this individual kind of sharing that maybe there is potentially, in some cases, maybe are not comfortable. Some folks in that demographic aren't super comfortable asking for help. And there are resources on SAMHSA's site, on some of these other links. There are resources for like specific crisis lines for veterans, for law enforcement. So that is I'm glad that this individual brought that up. So if you have a loved one or you know someone who is in or was in law enforcement or is a veteran, maybe having, you know, specific resources for that demographic, that can sometimes, someone may be more comfortable if they know they're calling or chatting with someone specifically meant to support that that individual and knows about more about their experiences. So I appreciate that you shared that. And there are a lot of different resource and community resources. And I think a lot of these kind of overarching links will have some of these embedded of different demographics as well. And so, you know, maybe someone is more comfortable kind of connecting with people if they're like, oh, I really want to make sure this person really gets me. And so there can be kind of more specific of those links that a lot of these you can find within these larger links here. All of these comments, questions are so wonderful. So I really appreciate that. This is our information. So just wanted to jump to this really quickly. So our 800 number is a phone number. So that is 24/7, 365. That is a crisis line. We're not going to turn anyone away who calls it. But if you do have us as an employee assistance program, just as a reminder, that is available to you if you need to talk to someone right away. Those individuals, again, are trained to handle crisis calls. If you have more questions about Canopy and the overarching services, you of course can go to our website. You can email us, but this is an additional crisis line that's available and free and confidential. I'm going to jump back to the resource slides. Let's see, just looking at the questions here. I want to see if I can get this a little bit bigger so I can read it easier. Yeah, so someone's asking about like thoughts on reviewing this material with a loved one who has had suicide ideation, maybe in the past or attempted in the past as a method of support. Yeah, absolutely. So if you have a loved one and if they have come to you in the past, or you know, you both know that is something that you've experienced, I think saying, hey, I wanted to check in, and you know, part of this, what's important to me is also educating myself on how to support myself, how to support others, and I wanted to share some information that I got if it's helpful. If there's anything else I can assist you with, I think that's sometimes, and we kind of touched on this earlier, but sometimes people worry about like checking in later. It's like, oh, am I gonna make it uncomfortable? Or, you know, so sometimes we kind of are like tiptoeing around a person, but no one's really checking in. And so it's important to check in and say, hey, I want to check in and see how you're doing. I know that we had talked in this date or this time, and I have some additional resources. I also just wanted to make sure that you knew that I'm always here for you. So that is also can be kind of that tie-in to continuing to check in with someone. And again, not in the way that you're their therapist, but just as a loved one, as a peer, that you are thinking about them, that you care about them. All right, let's see here. Yeah, and there's, you know, there are so many different dynamics in terms of social systems, larger systems, like so many different factors. And, you know, an individual kind of commented on there's so many different areas to consider when it comes to understanding, you know, prevention, both individually and within a community. And I absolutely agree. And I think this also was in the comment of like, that is another very big, very important topic. Today really was kind of just a quick overview on some signs, symptoms, what to do. And I'm also really glad that you mentioned that, because, you know, this isn't, you know, our experiences are not in a vacuum. There's lots of different factors that come into play. We also have a lot of other really wonderful trainings on our YouTube page that talk about different aspects to that. So that could be an additional resource to consider. But really, really appreciate all the comments and questions. Okay. So that really, again, was a quick overview. This is, you know, can be a difficult thing to talk about, but the more we talk about these things, the more we educate ourselves, the more we can reduce the stigma. And so it's a really important conversation. Someone had asked about how to deal with cultural differences. Someone is saying that no one will understand their experience. This is where I think it's also that really helpful way to normalize that. So instead of saying, don't worry, they will, no, that's, it's saying that is completely understandable. And I want to make sure that I can get you connected to resources that are going to be effective for you. For example, with Canopy, if someone is looking for a counselor, for example, with a certain background experience or in a certain demographic, we can narrow down and find that counselor for them. So I oftentimes will really make sure to hear that person, normalize that as a real thing, and say that's completely understandable. And so what I can do is try to help you get connected with someone who you feel comfortable with and feel like is a good fit. There will be a recording. So again, anyone who attended this live, you will get an email follow-up with the recording with an optional survey to fill out about today's training, and also if there's any other topics you'd like to suggest. We always like to get that feedback. Also, this entire webinar will be on our YouTube page in a few days. So yeah, someone's asking if Canopy has cultural specific counselors available. Absolutely. And so if you are a dependent, contacts us to set up services, please make sure to let us know if there's anything or anyone kind of specific, specialty, cultural background, language, anything, we can make sure to narrow it down and find a provider that's a good fit that falls into a category and a demographic that someone is looking for in terms of specific counselor background. Okay, all good questions. Again, appreciate all of that. So I think I went over those logistics. All right, we did okay. We're about 10 minutes, so I want to respect everyone's time. I appreciate everyone attending today. I really, really appreciate everyone's comments, questions, engagement in the presentation. I think, again, all of this is helpful to learn from each other and continue to educate each other. So I appreciate everyone attending today, and thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your week. Take care.